So here's the thing, ever since I first started playing random, right about a year or so ago, I've been having really strong matchups on the one hand, and then really weak ones on the other hand as well. If you've been watching the live streams whatsoever, you probably have noticed that I've been playing, I would say probably about like 10 to 20 hours or so of random each and every week, and I mostly focus on the 1 versus 1 ladder whenever I do play random, because that's really where I find most enjoyments. But to talk about some of my more powerful matchups, like my stronger matchups I suppose at the very least, like win rate wise, I'm feeling really comfortable in like Terran versus Zerg. I'm feeling pretty comfortable as well in Protoss versus Zerg, and of course pretty much all of my Zerg matchups feel pretty good as well. And the reason for that is that I basically have been playing Zerg ever since the beta of like Wings of Liberty. It's been like 7 years at this point. It's been a little while. But the matchups that are, I guess, furthest away from those are the ones that I struggle with the most. And I would say that is mostly going to be like my Terran versus Terran and then my Protoss versus Protoss. They feel kind of similar in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a lot about like army positioning and then like build orders and whatnot. And one of the things I've been trying to avoid, at least mostly, is to follow like a super strict build order. Sure, like, of course, if you're, like, fighting Protoss versus Protoss, for example, right? If one player has 10 Stalkers and the other one has 9 Stalkers, the one with 10 Stalkers will end up winning. And because you're making the same kind of units, it's pretty tricky to figure out exactly what it is you need to go for. So, I've been trying my very best to improve on the matchup, and one of the things I have been going for, and it is a little bit cheesy, but I've been going for a lot of robotics facility play, but I do indeed end up proxying the robotics facility. Now, what I got for you today, by the way, the game we are watching, is a game that I played a couple of days ago over on the live stream as well, and I felt pretty comfortable in this one, and it felt like I at the very least was on the right track and I was doing something right. Now I intend right here to go for the robotics facility as well, and I try my very best to get that one up on the other end of the map. But right as I want to go ahead and put it down as well, I notice that my opponent will start figuring out exactly what it is I am up to. So I'm waiting right now for my cybernetics core to finish. It is just about to go down. I'm like feeling comfortable, I'm feeling confident, and there I do see a glance of my opponent's probe. Now he first intends that he didn't see it, and then he sneaks back around to still scout my pylon there as well to see if he could see my tech building. But here's exactly what I have been struggling with in that Protoss versus Protoss matchup. So notice right here, right? It gets scouted, sure, I am not going to be able to proxy, sure, that's all fine and dandy. But here's the thing. Without really scouting, my opponent decides to throw up the Stargate, and without really scouting, I decide to go for the robotics facility. And really, like, that tech choice, that is what I'm mostly struggling with right now. I know on paper the Protoss Stargate openers seem to be best, and like late game you will usually see like a switch to robotics facility, or like late game, more like mid game I suppose. Generally speaking though, most of the pro gamers seem to open up with a lot of like Oracle into Phoenix play, for example. But the thing is that it's pretty difficult to micro those units, and I've been sort of trying to steer away from them. But here's like what it feels like. It feels a lot like playing rock, paper, scissors in Protoss versus Protoss. And what I mean with that is that Stargate openers counter robotics facility openers, right? Both of these are pretty common. Robotics facility openers counter Twilight Council upgrade openers, and most of the time that's going to be Blink Stalker openers. But then like Blink Stalker openers counter the Stargate openers, right? So it feels like sort of like a triangle of like builds that you're all trying to counter. And in most scenarios, if you are playing indeed like I am right now, I mean, we're both just sort of blindly throwing up our tech buildings, right? I decide to go for the robotics facility play, and my opponent decides to go for the Stargate play. In most scenarios, once it gets to this point, I am feeling pretty uncomfortable, because I don't really know exactly what to do at this point. Now, granted, of course, if I could go ahead and, or if I would go ahead, rather, and start scouting out exactly what it is my opponent is going for, and try, for example, to get in with an adept or whatever and figure it out, or if I would study, like, super strict build orders and really practice my control with those Stargate units, I'm sure I could be getting the upper hand as well. But I really enjoy the struggle, you know? Like, even though I say, like, I don't know what to do, it's not like I'm feeling desperate or whatever. I just really enjoy the struggle of, like, improving and losing a game and figuring out how to improve once again, because I'm not too worried about losses. But you know, I know very well that Stargate play is extremely common right now, and it's a threat. So I decide to do a couple of things here in the last couple of months, really. So one of the additions I've been going for is quick Stalker play, sometimes with a double gateway, but most of the time I just start producing as many Stalkers as I can before the robotics facility or the cybernetics core warp gate research is done. And then on top of that, I go for the mothership core and of course the pylon right here. I want to have a couple of right here, right behind my mineral line, so I can go for the photon overcharge if indeed my opponent decides to go for a little bit of aggression. For example, with like an oracle that's beaming down, so I can use that for photon overcharges, right? And those little things have been actually improving my win rate a lot already. Like building positioning like that, it makes a lot of sense, but you know, figuring out that that is why that's 4 usually is not nearly as easy. Now, I do intend to go for a little bit of aggression right now. Once I do finish up my immortals, generally speaking, have like 2 or so. To move across the map is really good because you can do a lot of damage to your opponent's army. But Phoenixes obviously can still be a threat even after Oracle play as well. So I don't want to push out all too early either, because I don't want all of my units being lifted and all of that. Now, at this point, I'm not entirely sure what my opponent is going for, but there we go. We do see that Oracle move into my mineral line, and this is a clear indication that I am in a little bit of trouble. So I do want to move out across the map, just because I know I'm still going to be able to, you know, hopefully do a little bit with at least the Stalkers that I have. I mean, they're still going to be able to do quite a bit of damage, but eventually, I am not assuming here that I'm going to be able to close out the game. Eventually here, I do want to try and grab myself an expansion as well, because, well, opening up with a Stargate basically immediately means that he's most of the time going to follow it up with Phoenixes, and if he can like lift up my Immortals and take those out of the equation, for the most part that's just the worst of the worst time I can really have. And you know, even more importantly, even like on top of that, is the fact that my opponent can obviously shoot down my War Prism that I would usually be in reinforcing with. Now, I do leave my Mothership Core right here at home, at the very least for the time being, and I start moving across the map. So there we go, Phoenixes are moving in, once again forcing a Photon Overcharge, and at this point, I'm out of Photon Overcharges, and I'm even forced to warp in Stalkers at home, because without it, I'm just gonna take so much damage. But at the same time, I do decide to move across the map. So, for the most part, it seems like whenever you do see Stargate openers, people are gonna switch into like quite an aggressive, like economy focused play as well, after which they eventually will be able to go ahead and play robotics. And as you can see, my opponent is indeed building that Nexus right now on the production tab, so we will be able to figure that out very shortly. I do decide to try and warp in a couple more Stalkers, still across the map, and I'm of course controlling my army here separately. Now notice here, my opponent already guys got these units. I gotta be extremely careful, but he hasn't scouted my my War Prism just yet, so he doesn't know that I'm actually fighting here across the map. And I know that if I'm gonna try and do some damage, I'm gonna have to fight like underneath Photon Overcharge and like nuke down that pylon as soon as I can. Now, one thing to note here is that my opponent's wall is not the greatest of greatest. I'm still leaving some units here at home as well to try and do some damage, but I'm gonna try and immediately nuke down that one pylon and then see if I can do the damage here that I'm looking for. Now, at the same time, the Phoenixes have returned home, so they're gonna try and see if they can deal the damage, but I'm still trying to power through to do as much damage as possible, because once these Phoenixes are down and I'm still gonna be able to do some damage, things should be all right. Now, while this is all going on though, I do decide to try and reinforce right here with an observer as well, but very shortly, I'm moving over my Mothership Core too, and the reason for that is that if I want to try and get this army out of there, one thing I've learned from playing this for a while against Phoenixes, army retreat is very difficult because they're just gonna lift all of it and eventually kill it. So one of the things I'm trying to do here is put my Mothership Core at like a safe distance so I can try and teleport out of there while nuking down as many of his ground units as possible. So the Phoenixes for the moment are out of energy, and I will be able to at the very least start nuking down his expansion. Now notice Mothership Core still on the way, almost here. I'm charging down on this Nexus, and right as I kill it, I'm gonna be able to teleport home. Now, this is obviously risky. It is not particularly reliable, but I've had a couple of games where this works. I mean, we just nuke down their expansion, we try and break them, and eventually we set ourselves up for an advantage that way because he runs out of the upgrades. Now, of course, I am gonna need a more reliable source to deal with my opponent's aggression, to deal with all of these Phoenixes. For example, I'm gonna need something a little bit better than just my Mothership Core and a few Stalkers. So eventually, I'm gonna be getting my Twilight Council here, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, if I remember this correctly, I even end up going for like a second Twilight Council because I accidentally made a second one. Yeah, there we go. I do actually put down a second one. But here my opponent decides to go into the Void Ray switch, and I am feeling confident. I mean, I got that expansion down right now. I got a lot of workers that I will be moving over shortly, at the very least hope. But as long as I'm dealing with my opponent's army, I should be good to go. Now, he is nuking down that pylon. We'll be able to, even he doesn't even get it right here. He's trying to see whatever damage he can do, lifting up as many of the units as possible. But with that Photon Overcharge and the help of a couple of my Stalkers, I'm going to be able to do quite a bit of damage. Oracle was still hanging out in the back of my natural, so I will be taking a few losses here and there. But all things considered, like, I obviously do have more right now than my opponent, as I have been doing a bunch more damage to him as well, and I got my expansion up, whereas he is still building his. Now, my Oracle defense, as you can see, is just not particularly great. I still need to work on that as well. I mean, I'm still losing way too many workers. I ended up losing How many is that? What color am I playing at right here? So I ended up killing 11. He ended up killing 18 workers this game, which is just... Yeah, it's just too many. It's just, you know, too many for me to deal with. And while I do see right now that I've got my double Twilight Council, I decide to see if I can go into a switch now as well. Now that I have indeed finished up my my first Twilight Council and my second one as well, and I decide to go for the Blink Stalker upgrade. My plan at this point is to try and see if I can move across the map with a bunch of Blink Stalker, with the Immortals that I've got left over, and see if I can do a killing blow. Now, I don't wanna pat myself on the back, okay? Like, I am not the greatest of greatest Protoss player, and I'm fully aware of that. But one of the things I do feel very confident about, and it's pretty much always been the case, is Blink Stalker Micro. Blink Stalker Micro is one of those things that obviously allows you to blink back your Stalkers and you can keep them alive for a significant amount of time. I've always sort of felt really comfortable doing that. Now, in this game, I do decide to go for the blink here as well, and I want to try and really see if I can get some value out of this. Now, I didn't realize it, but apparently you can indeed reach those phoenixes if they hang out in that corner. So I do get a nice little kill there. My opponent is still doing some annoyances here. Do have a Photon Overcharge available, so once again, gonna try and see if I can do some damage with that. But very shortly, I do want to try and move across the map, because I'm still in some trouble. But once I clean up all of the aggression, we're in a relatively good place, and I'm gonna be able to start warping in once again. We'll be able to get some additional gateways here as well, and I will be able to get myself a Warp Prism out soon too, because I am gonna need that if I want to try and reinforce that. At the very least, I believe I do indeed go for that, what is it called? Actually, do I still have it out? No, actually, that's an Observer, never mind. I am gonna need the Warp Prism here if I want to reinforce this army, or I can, of course, use the Pylon as well. For now, I'm going to use some defensive warpins as well, just in case my opponent decides to be aggressive. But just as Blink finishes up, I figured this would be the superb time to see if I can do some damage, and that's exactly when I am moving across the map as well. Now, I am eventually getting my my Warp Prism here, but here we go. Here goes nothing. I want to try and see if I can do the damage. Wanted to lead that with the unit here initially at first, but I'm going to have to try and do as much damage here with Blink Stalker. Now, of course, my Blink Stalker is not the greatest in the world, but I feel pretty comfortable with it, because often times you can sort of just distract the target firing as well, you know? And while, of course, I don't want to take any unnecessary risks, and I don't want to, you know, tank all of the damage on my Immortals, that is not really what I want to do here either. As long as I can eventually deal some damage, my opponent should slowly but surely start taking crippling amounts of damage. I do indeed end up taking quite a bunch of those units out, and with that Warp Prism joining in very shortly, it is currently flying across the map, and I'm actually going to go ahead and, you know, move across the map with a significant chunk of my army here as well. As long as I'm eventually going to be able to deal with all of it, we should be in a good spot. Another Phoenix does end up falling. My opponent decides to apparently switch into a High Templar's Archive right here, so he's trying to get some damage with those as well. But at this point, I'm feeling pretty happy about the scenario, because I get a massive warp in, and I know that while this was all going on, I should have been able to get the superb army composition, as well as like a pretty reasonable amount of economy, more than likely at the very least facing and matching his own. And with that, I'm gonna be able to do a significant amount and eventually close out the game. Now, Protoss versus Protoss, it's a difficult matchup. There is a lot left to learn, and I feel like over the next couple of months, as long as I keep on playing, I'm probably gonna be able to figure it out a lot more. It takes quite a lot of losses to learn how to play this matchup. I mean, you can die to like a random Dark Templar push, you can die to like a random Blink Stalker all-in, you can die to like proxy gateways, you can die to like all kinds of cheese, and it's super difficult and tricky to play properly. I mean, little things like pylon placements are so important in Protoss versus Protoss, and the only way you're really gonna be able to learn it is just simply by losing games and figuring out exactly what went wrong, and then, you know, not making those mistakes again. But anyways, so that is an update on my Protoss versus Protoss. Blink Stalkers feel pretty good, but in general, it feels a lot like playing rock, paper, scissors. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but it certainly feels that way. I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you in the next one.